Good afternoon, CIT 261. I am giving you another demonstration here of how to do a training video. As you start to meet in your teams this week, you're going to be doing this on a regular basis. So this week you're going to meet, first of all, in your team to get to know who each other is. Look at your elevator pitches. Maybe come up with an idea, with two ideas for a team application you'd like to do, and then later this week, you're going to start doing what I'm doing here. You're going to take an assignment to teach one of the code topics and do that in 10-15 minutes. The first time I did it local storage, that was like 30 minutes. That's too long, especially if it's going to be interactive with each other, with everybody talking and asking questions. So I'm going to do it AJAX, which sometimes is daunting and off-putting for students, and show you that's not nearly as anxiety causing as you may think. So let me share my screen here. Do the fade away to infinity. And let me give you a code demonstration first. Let's see, the code demonstration is over here. This is a very simple application that I created. I have 3 buttons here, and I'm going to demonstrate 3 very, very similar ways of pulling data from the server. I am not using PHP where I'm hitting a database and grabbing data. I am simply grabbing a file. I am grabbing a small file, a JSON file, and an HTML file. Let's show you really quick what these files look like. The text file is just hello world. The JSON file has a single key in it, JSON key, and the value for the key with a little bit of HTML tags snuck in there. And then the HTML file is just some stripped down HTML. There's no header, there's no title, no body, it's just the HTML. So we're going to grab this and we're going to throw it onto the screen, and I'll show you that here in a second. So you can see I've got some text, doing some bolding, and then I have a button. A button that is inside of a div called new div. So let's click the read a small file button. What's going to happen? I'm going to read that file, and I'm going to replace the button with text. So the text from the file is going to replace this. So there's the whole hello world. We're going to do the same thing now with the JSON file. Value for the key, remember that's what was in the JSON file, and then the HTML file, remember it has some text, some bolded text, and a button. So I replace that, and then this button here, I'm going to click this because this button also has an on-click function, and it's going to reload, it's going to read itself the hello world file. All right, that's all I'm going to show here. Now let's jump over here to my presentation, my PowerPoint presentation. I want to introduce just a little bit of AJAX. There's much more to it than what I'm showing you, but I'm trying to inoculate you on AJAX that it's not as daunting as you may think. So here it is in 6 lines of code. When I was a programmer, I always prided myself on being able to do almost anything in 1 line of code. This takes 6 lines of code. So if you have an on-click function, on-click event, like I did on those buttons, and I'll show you the HTML here in a minute. The on-click method is going to call get file from server. In order to get something from the server, you have to have a connection from the server. So you use XML HTTP request to get you a connection. And then you're going to modify that connection. You're going to set different attributes in it to tell the server what to do and how to do it. The onReady state change is a pointer to a function. And this function is going to be called when the file has been delivered by the server. In this case here, and I'm going through this quickly, and then we're going to go through each of the lines individually. onReady state change, I'm assigning that a function, and the name of that function is Nothing. This is called an anonymous function. So I just am going to define the function right here. And that every time we get a message from the server, it's going to call this function. And we're going to ask, is the ready state 4? Is the status 200? If it is, we're going to take the response text from the server and put that into a div field and change the contents of that div. That's what we will do when the data is ready. Now, there is the open function where we tell the server what we want and how we want it. So we're going to, the hello text is the name of the file. Get is how we're going to get it, get or post. Hello text is the file URL. And true is whether it's asynchronous or synchronous. And then send is when we we tell the server, do it. Start here, you know what to do now, deliver us the file. So here it is line by line. We get the request object. And I kind of explained it fairly well on the previous page. It's just connection to the server. But you need to give it some specifics so it knows what to do. The onReady state change is a pointer to a function. And we will see more of that on the next slide. The open method, you tell it the method of delivery, the URL of the file you want, and asynchronous or is not. So the method is get or post. I'm using get, and I'm leaving some things out here for you to find out what it is. What's the difference between get and post? URL is simply the file location on your server. If you remember, if your file is in the root of the directory, put a slash at the beginning. If you don't have a slash there, it is going to assume the file is in the same folder as the executable that you've got here. So make sure you get your file name set up correctly. Asynchronous, true for asynchronous, false for synchronous. Well, since AJAX stands for asynchronous Java, we are going to use true. And send, as we just tell the server, here it comes. There's a different syntax there for doing the send. If you use a post, you'll have to look at that up on your own. All right, so the onReady state change. Once a function, it says I need to do something whenever the server communicates to me. So give me a function to call whenever the server gives me a heads up. And so we have chosen to use an anonymous function, and the server will be called every time the state changes or the status changes. And we have to wait until we get a 4 and a 200, respectively, for us to know that it is ready to go. And once we have it, then that means the data is ready and we need to do something with it. Like what? Well, it depends on your data. And where do you find the data? The data is in a field called response text in your XML HTTP object. So you take that text and put it onto your screen. And I'm going to do something simplistic here. I'm going to get an element that's on the screen called text div, and I'm going to change the HTML for that div, and I'm going to change it with the response text from the server. Remember the hello world? That's where we're going to put the hello world into where the button used to be. Now, the get element by ID, you're going to have to figure that out when somebody teaches about DOM, but it allows you to get access to fields on the screen. Now, there's cooler things that you can do as well. Now, to do well in AJAX in this class, you need to grab a JSON object. And if it's a JSON object, it isn't a text object, so you're going to need to parse it. So all you do is you take JSON.parse and pass it in the response text, and that gives you a JSON data object. And here at the last line on the presentation, I do JSON data dot the name of the key field. Is that it? It is. That is it. There's really not too much to it. Those 6 lines of code do most of, are the things that you're going to do very, very frequently. Now, the do stuff in your code, let me go, oops, back to the presentation. This do stuff here, that's where all the fancy stuff is, where you manipulate your data. There is much more to AJAX than what I've shown you here. I'm going to show you the code of that application here next. But I want you to make sure you understand the state machine nature of AJAX. And you're going to find that on many websites out there. W3 Schools, like many things that you can do in this class, is a great resource. So this is, let's go back to the code we looked at on page 1. That in a nutshell is how you get some information from your server. You get a connection to the server, you tell the server, here's the function I want you to call every time you communicate to me. And here's the file I want, do it. Now let's take a look at the code. Let's see, let's go over to my editor. Remember, I had 3 buttons on the screen. I had read a small file, get file from server, and I'm going to pass in text file.txt, and text div. Notice that text div is the same div here. So the contents of this div is the button, and we're going to replace the contents of this div with the contents of the file. So that's why the hello world replaces this button. And false says this is a text file. On the JSON one, we're passing in a true because it's a JSON file. We have to do 1 line of code different there. The HTML, just a text file. So all 3 of these use the very same method to invoke the AJAX function. So on click, call get file from server. So there's the code. We get the HTTP request object. All of this is going to be up on the class community for you to look at. Then here is the method that gets called every time something happens on the server. And we look for the ready state of 4 and the status of 200. You guys go find out why, though they are special. And then when the code is complete, when the status is what we want, we're going to pass the response text to this do something with the response method. We're going to pass the div ID that we had up here. This is the div ID. So we're going to tell this method, this is the one we want you to manipulate. And then we're going to pass in the is JSON. That's the true false here. Is JSON. That is JSON is just simply is the text we're getting back a text file or JSON. So here's the do something. And we're not doing too much, but you can do simple expansion of this code is the basis of everything that you're doing with AJAX. So the response text, is it JSON? If it is, then we better parse it. So we're going to JSON.parse the response, and that's going to then make this response text a JSON object. If it's not JSON, just assign the response text the response value. Then finally, down here, we're using DOM to get access to a field on the screen, div ID. That might be the text button, the JSON button, or the HTML button. If it's JSON, then we need to treat this object here, the response text, as a JSON object. We know that the key value was called JSON key. And if it's not JSON, then we just take the text. So here, we replace the text, we replace the contents of the div. And remember, the contents of the div were these input buttons. So let's go run the code one more time. We're going to read the small file, hello world, read the JSON, and this time around, We're going to have it as a JSON object, and we're going to do the JSON text dot key, JSON key. Here we're going to grab some HTML, and here we're going to, and notice this is a brand new object that's been created on the screen. Small text file, it has an onClick method associated with it, and it's going to read the hello world file itself. And that is the basis of AJAX. I'm going to show you one more thing here really quick. If whenever the server calls back the onReady state change function, 99% of the time you're just looking for the 4 and the 200, and then you're going to go do something. Well, I'm going to put this line of code in here that says put the ready state and status out to the screen so I can see it. So now, let me refresh the page here. Now we get ready state of 1, 2, 3, and status 0 to 200. What about when the JSON object goes? Okay, I get the very same thing with each one of them. And that's just a little bit behind the scenes, what is happening with the code. I'm going to leave those commented out because I don't particularly care to have them getting in the way on the screen now that you've seen it once. And just for good measure, it's back to normal. All right, that is all I'm going to show you. Let me get back to the presentation here. Hopefully this was a little bit short, smaller than the last time I talked with you with the local storage. So you're going to do this a little bit longer in the teams because you should have people asking questions. What if you did this? Go change the code like I did. Play around with it and see different things that you can manipulate the files, change the files that you receive. Sometimes your browser is going to cache the file, so if you change things, it may not always pick it up, but keep refreshing, you'll catch it. Hopefully this will shed a little bit of light on AJAX, make it not quite so mysterious, and give you another example of how to do training. So I'm going to sign off here. I'm going to post this to the team site. There's a folder in the useful, helpful resources on the class community. Make sure you go look at that and you'll see my code. You can take that and play around with it, and it should work for you. Have a good afternoon. Talk to you guys later.